right, welcome back to this wonderful discussion on matters the taxing nation. And this is the Business Fix. In studio, I have a wonderful panel of gentlemen. CPA Dennis Wakaba, tax expert from ISPAC. Thank you very much for making time. Patrick Nyangweso, CEO, National Taxpayers Association. Robert Maina, Associate Director Tax at Ernst & Young. Thank you very much for making time. And at the far end is Sandeep Main, tax partner and also regulatory services at KPMG. Gentlemen, you've seen the breaking down of the numbers. Sandeep, there was a minor correction. We were talking about the timelines, how much time we were given to file. And we have a culture as a people that we tend to do things last minute. What was proposed within the bill, and what were the deliberations after? What is in Act?
Yeah, thanks, Noah, and thank you so much for sharing that those insights. I think the first element was that the bill actually had 3 deadlines. It talked about nil liability, which you should file by end of January. So if you had a nil tax liability, then you should file by end of January. Then it talked about 4 months, which was April, and then the 6 months. But obviously, when you talk about nil tax liability, the question that a lot of taxpayers raised was, so if I'm in tax losses, I do not have a tax liability. Am I still required to pay or file my return by end of January? What does that speak to my audit process, which cannot be done possibly within a couple of weeks? So obviously what I've seen then definitely sailed through on the House last week, was that it was amended to say that individuals, so if your PIN starts with the letter A something, then you must file your return by 4 months, within the 4th month, which is April. And for companies or corporates, your PIN starts with the letter P, you still file by 6 months. So the end of the financial year, 6 months thereafter, you file your tax return. I think for me, the only challenge is that sometimes even sole proprietors do have that letter A. So you trade in your own name. So you do have books of accounts. I think partnerships also, you file your tax returns individually. That might be a challenge for me to conclude your audits and to file by the 4th month. But generally now we have 2 filing deadlines as opposed to just the 1, which is usually the 6 months after the end of your financial year. Now you have 2. So individuals, let's be clear, whether sole proprietor or employee, file your returns by April, because all individuals are deemed to be December year ends.
Yes.
And then corporates continue in 6 months.
Okay. That's quite interesting, because tax administration is at the heart of all that, and we'll come and unpack that. But reason why I love this fact that you've specified individuals and corporates. Most of the times we put it in the pot and we mix it up, and we don't understand. We have too many taxes. There is excise, there is VAT, there is payee. All this is happening, it's going on. Sometimes when you speak, if you were paying attention during the Esther Diana story, Kenyans are like, I am overtaxed. I just know I have to wake up earlier, I'm spending more. How are these people getting me? We have today to unpack the major tax heads. And I want to bring in Robert. Robert, help us understand the way the Kenyan taxation system is set in very simple language. What taxes are there? How are they classified in a simple way that everyone can understand what we owe to Caesar at the end of the day?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much, Noah, for having me today. It's my pleasure to be here. Now, in very simple terms, our Kenyan tax system is divided into 2. We have direct taxes and indirect taxes. Now, let me focus on the direct tax bit. This is a tax that is paid by you and me on your income. It's direct on your income. So it's a direct tax. It's like the time I'm using, direct, it's direct on you. Meaning, if I'm earning a salary, I'll be subjected to PAYE, which is the most common tax for anyone who is working. So they'll be deducting, and the good thing is that you had a very good illustration that anyone earning above 24,000 per month is subjected to PAYE. Just hoping that they are in the formal economy, meaning they have been onboarded by KRA. Now, other than PAYE, the other common tax is corporate income tax. Now, this is for companies. So anyone with a company, whether it's an SME, a big company, or a big, corporate institution, they pay on their income. Obviously, there are certain expenses that are allowed to be deducted before they pay their taxes. The main difference between PAYE, which is the tax on the individuals, and how corporates pay the tax on their income, is that corporates are allowed to deduct expenses before we get the income that is subject to tax, subject to certain restrictions here and there. But for individuals, whatever the employer agrees to pay you, you do not deduct your transport, your rent, nothing. I mean, you suffer tax on the gross amount. That's the key difference. The main tax under that, the other tax would be withholding tax. But just to point out is withholding tax can be two ways. It could be a final tax. Final tax in the sense that if the person who is paying you withholds, you have nothing further to do about that income. And just to give an example, if you're earning dividends from a Kenyan company and you're deducted 5% as a Kenyan, you don't need to pay any further tax on that. If you have invested in a bank, let's say it's in a fixed deposit, you have invested in the most common thing I've seen now is the money market funds. All these funds as an individual, the 15% deducted by that payer is final. I don't need to do anything about it. But there are cases where it is an advance, meaning they are just deducting a portion of that, but I will still be required to account for tax, on the difference. And that would be, let's say, professional fees. If I, Robert, I offer professional services to someone, I'll be deducted 5% by the payer. But at the end of the year, I will be required to pay tax on the differential between the 5% and the normal graduated scale. So it comes down to differentiating that. For the indirect taxes, maybe I'll give one to look at them, but I wanted to focus on the direct taxes, and that's the direct hit on your income.
Definitely. And we got to come to, actually, let's just do indirect taxes. So we've understood. Direct is on your income, okay? Yes. Your earnings, either individually or as a company, because companies are entities. Yeah. Whatever money you make there, the government is like, we need a portion of that. Yes. So this one affects majorly people who have businesses that have been onboarded, individuals who are within the formal tax net. So your employer pays you and they remit taxes to carry based on that. So that is direct. It's impacting you directly. We need to understand that. There is indirect tax. And Wakaba, CPA, help us break this down. Indirect tax. Because majority of Kenyans, actually, we are registered taxpayers, but very few, just a portion of it, pays those direct taxes that have been spoken about. Talk to us about indirect tax. What do those entail?
Now, the biggest distinction between indirect taxes and direct taxes is what my colleague alluded to, whereby for the direct taxes, I would say they are levied directly to your personal income, either as an individual or a corporate. But for indirect taxes, these are the taxes you pay, but they are not levied directly on you. And what I mean is, like for instance, after you've earned an income, say at the end of the month, you've received your payslip, you've received a certain amount in your bank, whenever you go to buy something, be it from the supermarket, or maybe you want to go enjoy a meal somewhere, in a hotel or something, you receive an invoice. And this invoice usually has, you'd say, the cost of the product or the cost of the service. And then thereafter, you're going to see some certain breakdown beneath sort of the block figure, whereby you're going to see some additional taxes and levies. And therefore, some of these indirect taxes are, by way of example, we have VAT, it's the value-added tax. And the value-added tax, and I hope maybe we are going to come to this later on, the value-added tax is tax levied on the value addition in the supply chain. Therefore, if I've bought a product, or if maybe I am a manufacturer, and I've bought all these inputs, I've bought everything that I need to make the final product, that value addition that I've done to these inputs, to these packaging materials and all that, to arrive at the final product, the value addition is what is taxed at largely 16%. Even though we have other classes of VAT, we have the 0%, and we also have the exempt. And maybe because I was happy when, I think it was the CS was saying that, it was the chair of the Parliamentary Finance Committee was expressing gratitude to Kenyans that they seem curious to want to understand if I may, in simple terms, really help differentiate between the two. For the 16%, you have a product being levied at a flat 16%. At 0%, you still have a product provided for in the VAT Act being taxed at 0%. But now where the confusion rises with most people is that there are some products which are exempt. And therefore, the distinction between the 0% and the exempt is that for somebody who is selling a product or a service that is being charged at 0%, then for any VAT, they incur by way of buying the raw materials and everything else to make that product, they would be in a position to claim that from the Kenya Revenue Authority. However, for the person who is dealing with exempt supplies, the input that you incur so that you can make this final product or you can deliver this particular service, that becomes an added cost on you. Yes, you're not charging any VAT whatsoever, but that input that you incur becomes an added cost to you. The second, and perhaps the most common other type of indirect taxes, is the excise duty, which has evolved, I must mention, over time, especially because the excise duty was largely introduced or even referred to as the sin tax. By this I mean, the reason for the introduction of the excise duty was to deter or to prohibit people from taking some certain things, think of alcohol and those kind of things. But now we've seen this now being expanded to include, to introduction of excise duty on luxurious items, and also in the financial sector. So yes, you pay so by way of a summary, the indirect taxes are the taxes that you pay, but you're not charged perhaps on your income,
yes,
but you pay those taxes indirectly at the point of procuring either services or goods.
All right.
Yeah.
Very important. So in one way or another, we're gonna get you.
Yes.
You're gonna pay taxes somehow. If you're to survive, you'll pay it either directly or indirectly or both, as it happens for a lot of people. So that distinction is very important for we as Kenyans to understand and know how taxes impact us.
Absolutely.
I want to bring in Patrick Nyangweso, CEO National Taxpayers Association. I mean, Patrick, the way we understand this, because I think over the past 10 years, that curiosity and participation of Kenyans when it comes to financial matters in this country has really changed. Initially, we used to wait for the budget and ask, sukari imepanda, ama maziwa imepanda. And now it's a totally different ballgame. Everyone is knees deep. So when you look at the way we've broken down the different types of taxes and classification, is it the situation on the ground when you talk to the taxpayers, or is it still a bit complicated?
Well, I think, I was listening to my colleagues, and I want to really appreciate them for really putting the taxation discussion in a very simpler term. That a mother who sits in Nyandarua, one who sits in Marsabit or in Suba can easily understand type of taxes and when you are expected to pay. But just to answer your question, I was listening to some of the videos you captured, just a preview, before we started the discussion, where wananchi are crying a fall that they are overtaxed. And I want to bring to the attention to the citizens and also my professional colleagues that on the ground it is true that citizens or taxpayers are really crying of all that there is overtaxation. They feel that Kenyans are overtaxed. But scientifically, I want to say, compared to even within the EAC globally, statistically, Kenyans are not overtaxed. And I would explain to that. If you check the tax revenue to GDP ratio, then we still stand 13 to 14%, but this current financial rate is around 17.1%, compared even to the EAC requirement of around 25%, if you check even globally with other countries. But now what happens that Kenyans believe and trust that or complain that they are overtaxed? Around 5 things. One, you see, Noah, if you check the tax burden, it is very disproportionate. It is only skewed towards a small portion of the population. If you ask KRA, who are in the tax net, national tax net, is less than 5 million. So these are companies or individuals who comply frequently, and when now the finance bills is brought, they are the same people who are feeling the heat. Then if you go to the ground, the people who are not employed, who are not paying payee, as the taxpayers, whenever they want to buy food products, because of high cost of production, the VAT element that my friend was explaining is passed to them without knowing that that is form of tax. When you see the exercise duties being imposed or levied on certain products, then the local mwananchi feels the burden. Now, the tax burden that is caused because just a few Kenyans feel that they are the ones who are really carrying the shoulder. Burden, the tax burden on behalf of other Kenyans now makes everyone feel that, no, we are overtaxed. Now, check, you have talked about also the tax public debt burden. The funds that are auto revenue that is ought to go and for development, we are spending to pay for our public debt. So this gives a serious gap to taxpayers, such that when we have depleted roads, you are a local small-scale farmer, maybe in Nyandarua or Trans Nzoia, buying inputs, the cost of inputs are very high because it is passed indirectly. You see, that's what you are bringing, indirectly to the consumers without them knowing. If you go to the fuel levies are high, if you go to the county levies are high. Here we are busy talking of now National Finance Act. We are forgetting that there are also county levies that the local mwananchi are going to be faced from July 1st. Yeah. So you see, all these levies, when they are combined, you find that a parent in a local village wants to take the child to school. This burden is passed through the school fees. Maybe you are paying rent, you are paying water bills. So Kenyans have a reason to say they are overtaxed because of this indirect taxes. So it's something that we really need to see how to address. Then I want to come to disposable income. For the payee, the ones who are in the tax net, and also the corporate, the individuals or companies, they also feel they feel the burden because if you check this, we thought that the government in this current financial year, which has just been signed today by His Excellency the President, Finance Act, would really consider reducing the payee, that band that we are being told. Because the first band of 10%, that is only covering people who are earning 24,000 and above slightly. But the second band, if you check the national tax policy, that is the people who are earning 100,000 and above, and there are very few in this country. In fact, in this room, I don't think we have many. There are very few. So you see, when they are still paying 35%, so at the end of the day, your sleep cannot facilitate purchasing power. So you see, look at the villages. The people, for us to have high cash flow, or when teachers spend, for example, when teachers spend and we don't interfere with their slaves, then you see the mother who sells potatoes would feel that at least they have also the high purchasing power, there's a disposable income. So when this translates to the common mwananchi, then they feel the heat.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is why you see everybody is like crying that, no, we are overtaxed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes.
And definitely, in many ways, that experience is very personal. You know, I think the other day, during the budget period, you know, we were talking with the PS, you know, Treasury. He was saying numbers are very stubborn, and he was giving the positive numbers. But when you talk to Kenyans, they're feeling otherwise. So there is sort of a disconnect right there. But Sandeep, I want to come to you. With this different classification of tax heads, okay? You have the direct ones, straight to you, your earnings, and the indirect ones. When you purchase stuff, you know, they still get you. How does that look currently in our ecosystem? Is there a heavy reliance on one over the other? And what would it look ideally in a healthy economy? Not saying that this is an unhealthy economy, but how ideally will that look like?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Noah. I think for me, possibly the conversation would be around purchasing power, and I think Patrick here really talked about it. So if you look at it, maybe a couple of years ago, 1,000 shillings would mean a lot to the common man and lady as well. But that same 1,000 shillings today might not hold the same value that it did a couple of years ago. And I can't just say it's because of local taxation or indirect, direct. It's probably a lot about even geopolitics. We have seen how the price of fuel shot up in the recent months because of geopolitics. Nothing that was in control of this country, but definitely could we have done something about it? Possibly. But generally, again, in fuel, you see about 50 or 52% of that price per liter is taxes and levies. So I think for me, when you break it down between direct and indirect, yes, there is an element that is doing better than the other. But more importantly, indirect taxes are largely consumption taxes, meaning that I must be able to spend. If I'm spending, then I'm able to contribute to that eventual indirect tax that's been collected. But I'm going to flip the conversation. The reason why, and I did listen into the previous segment as well, is that I think there's a trust deficit between the taxpayer or even the wananchi and the government, because while you're demanding taxes, and it's good to demand taxes because that's the only way you can run a country or an economy, you have heard, and rightfully so, out of the 4.8 trillion, 2.9 trillion for next financial year is going to have to be funded by revenue authorities, so revenue collections. So the only way you do that is expanding the tax base. I think for me, and I'm going to take a step back into history, the 2024 finance bill as it was then obviously shot down, but was looking to collect almost 300 billion Kenyan shillings, okay? Get into 2025, that element went down to about 34B, and today this particular Finance Act, there were different numbers being tossed around. I think initially I heard 120B, then it went to 90B, and now I think I saw 98B. So it's a drastic decrease in terms of new tax measures. What's changing is really cleanup. So things that were previously, exempt or zero-rated are being brought into the VAT category, for example. Any exemptions that were there from an income tax are being removed. There's a whole issue, and I don't know if you saw it, around tax losses. So if you're a corporate, initially you could claim tax losses into perpetuity. 2025 said, hang on, only 5 years. And I think my challenge is the current Finance Act, the provision that's sailed through is that you must make an investment of 10 billion shillings if you want to carry forward your tax losses into perpetuity. And you need to have that investment on or before June 2025. All right? What does that mean? That actually means that businesses that have made an investment of 10 billion Kenyan shillings or equivalent are going to be allowed to carry forward their tax losses. But any other business that was in tax losses, and I'll tell you to try and file a return of a company that is in tax losses, the system itself does not allow you to claim anything historically. Whether it's a glitch or intentional is a different conversation. Obviously, there's a High Court ruling that says any loss before 2025 should be carried forward into perpetuity. But is that what we're actually following? I'm getting to the point to say that while the law is trying to say that I'm not introducing new taxes, there's a lot of cleanup. So if imagine a business that had a tax loss as of 2025, then suddenly you wake up and you can't claim that loss. And then you're in a profitable position, you would contribute to the direct taxes. So I think for me, while there is that element of direct, indirect, and there are different buckets, obviously I think pay-as-you-earn, as is rightfully mentioned, is not that substantial. There's the VAT as well, there's the indirect taxes of customs and excise as well. But Noah, I think the most important point here is the expansion of the tax base. And I think that's where, a lot of the Kenyans are getting hit, because today, in order for me to trade with you, I would want an ETIMS invoice. I need that ETIM so that I can claim that business expense, rightfully so, legitimately. You have never raised an invoice. You're in the cash economy. And I'm telling you, raise an invoice. There was a conversation that said, oh, but I don't have technology. I don't have a smartphone. I don't have access to technology or Wi-Fi. KRA introduced the USSD code. Star 222 hash. Try that. The first thing it asks you, do you have a PIN? Say no. What's your ID number? Punch in your ID number. It automatically brings up your details because the systems are integrated. Now you have a PIN. Within seconds you have a PIN. You're within the tax bracket. And that's great because we're trying to expand the tax base. I think the CS talked about total taxpayers, and he was very proud to say we are now at 6.6. But comparatively to a voting database of what, about 12 or 13 million people in 2022?
31, yeah. The one in
half
job.
are paying tax, to your point, Patrick. Even if you give that, some of them could be students or people who just need or retired people, they could be still a potential mass that's not paying the right amount of tax. So we're saying if everyone can contribute, and by the way, Kenya does have the national tax policy, looks great on paper, not been implemented because it is a policy, not legislation. We do have the medium-term revenue strategy. This is where Kenya said that we want to be, and we are in the sunset year. We wanted to reduce VAT from 16 to 14. We wanted to reduce the corporate income tax rate from 30 to 25.
Okay.
And that can only be done if the tax base is actually expanded, and we are actually trying to get towards somewhere in terms of our revenue collections.
That's very powerful, and I know you want to say something, Patrick, but I want to come to Robert quickly to build on that case. So when you talk about the Mwananchi and the taxes, it boils down to cost of living and affordability. So that disposable income, if it shrinks every other day, then my automatic thing is like, I'm being taxed more. I feel it. Whether it's direct or indirect, it doesn't matter. I'm feeling it more. So looking at that, maybe tell me in how we're operating right now and where we are in terms to Sandeep's point of expanding, bringing more Kenyans into the tax net with the trust deficit that we already have. I mean, as somebody in this world, how do we build confidence in a system to say that I'm willing to be taxed without a level of coercion? In fact, feeling like I'm contributing to a nation that I'm part of.
Wow. Thank you very much for that. A very, very pertinent question in today's day and age. There's one point I think, because when I look at the genesis of why people are feeling they've been taxed the way they have been, if I focus on employees, I think there's one bit that we typically don't focus on because they're not taxes. Think about what has happened since this government came into force. They could be good, depending on who you ask, or they could be a bit burdensome. Social housing, social security contributions, UNSSF. We moved from 200 shillings flat to 6% of your pay. Then came the housing levy, which was never there. 1.5% of your pay. Then came the NHIF, which is a social, now they're called SHIF now, which was a flat, very minimal. I think most people are paying below 1,000 to now 2.75% of your pay. I was doing some simple arithmetic. That's a sum total of 10.25%. 6%, 1.5 plus 2.75%. 10.25% went to different, avenues, and people are getting that in their pockets. Now, having even factored in what the CS did, I believe last year, by giving those, contributions and allowable deductions, we still have 7.1% of what people are making before this government came into force going into different ways. Someone might argue they are good. For instance, social security contributions, that's your pension, so it's your money, but you're feeling the hit now. Someone may not be happy that the money has gone as much as it's going to help them later. Housing levy, the whole debate, is it yielding the benefits around it? Are we getting jobs? And I'm happy to quote the president who said that the housing levy or the housing project is not about the houses, it's about the jobs. The people who are going to be employed there, the suppliers of the materials and all that. So it's a whole debate there, and I know there are different views on that. Now, the other one is shift. People are contributing a lot. I mean, even those who are not employed, they have to, fill in a form, and they will determine how much they need to contribute. Now, where this deficit is being lost is on this. We have some of these. Let's say shift. I am paying 2.75% of my pay. But if I do have a sick parent, literally, if I take them to a public hospital, I'll probably not find drugs, so I'll probably have someone admitted there, but I will be sent to the nearest chemist to buy the drugs. I will be paying a lot of things out of pocket. So what then makes it very difficult is that people are paying more towards healthcare, but indeed these benefits are not flowing to them. Because remember, those people who are employed are probably the ones who are feeling the biggest burden, as much as those who are not are still paying. But they are also the ones who are supporting a lot more people there. And we do not deny it. In this country, there's a high dependency rate. The people who are employed are supporting a lot of people out there. And so if a lot of income has been taken from me, and I'm still required to pay out of pocket for so many other things, then I start feeling the pain. And I cannot understand what my taxes are doing. And the same thing with the housing. I mean, I know that the whole thing, someone will say, will I get a house? No. That's the pain I've had from the people here. That they are saying they are being deducted, they don't know about the house. I know there's a whole allocation criteria, but I think the government should also come out clearly that, demonstrate results. And this is happening. So the trust deficit can only be won if, based on these additional levies and the taxes that we already paid, the government can continuously demonstrate that even though you are paying these additional 10%, which is not part of your taxes, we actually don't consider this to be taxes, yet they have hit your pay. You're actually getting some benefits out of them. And so you will, because, I mean, this is the reality. If I cannot, the reason why people feel they don't have the money is because I've paid these levies, so I've received less. And you're saying there's inflation, or the cost of things has gone up. In school, you say there's free education. But the reality on the ground, that's not the case in most times. There are so many other things that people pay. We've seen in high schools, I know the government is trying to control that, but there is a lot. You and me could afford it. But there are so many people out there, if you ask them an extra 20,000, those kids are going to go home. So those things that, the basics, healthcare, education, and food, those are the key things that we really have to solve.
Definitely. I know, Patrick, you are waiting for your rebuttal with your notes.
Yes.
So I'll give you an opportunity before the points evaporate.
Yes. There's something that I want to pick from my brother Sadib, what he has brought in on tax base and also NTC. For a long time, since Kenyatta won, Moi, Kibaki, Kenyatta 2, and now President William Ruto, taxation matters has really been an issue. And even if you bring the experts like us, people still get it differently. And until 2023, I know Kenyans have forgotten this. The executive through the National Assembly, we brought in what is called national tax policy, a framework that now was to provide guideline in terms of predictability of our taxation system in Kenya, element of accountability, simplifying tax system, and also it provides provision on how to really levy taxes across the board, from the small, medium enterprises to the large corporates, and even to individual, the ones who are in the payee bracket. That's where those bands were being brought in. And it has a very broader framework, including how to deal with the hard-to-task population. The hard-to-task population, if you saw what CS Mbadi was trying to focus on, if you see even now the Act, the Kenya Finance Act itself, 2026-2027, it puts more emphasis on how to reach out to this hard-to-reach population. That is where the digital space are, the digital entrepreneurs. That's where local small-scale farmers are, and also you know them, the tax evaders. And with the time, I'll talk about it. Now, this national tax policy, the framework to implement this is what my brother was calling the MTRS, the medium-term revenue strategy. So it outlines how year 1, 2023, 2024, 2024, 2025, 2025, 2026, now 2026, 2027. So a 5-year plan. Now, when Kenyans, this one was subjected to public participation, all Kenyans who are the taxpayers were like, I think this one would solve the problem. Now, it has not solved the problem. The reason is very simple. Because we still have very many tax evaders. There's still low tax education. I tell you, Noah, if you go to Trans Nzoia, uko mashinani, and ask even the taxpayers what is expected of them to really support the taxation system in Kenya, they don't understand. In fact, they think KRA is the one who is collecting and is responsible for development. Now, the national tax policy was also supposed to address the issue of public trust. Because there is a survey that we conducted a few months ago. It's called National Tax Perception Survey. And in that report, Noah, 3 things came up. Kenyans do not have problem paying taxes, even if the way they were interviewed today. But the level of trust, because when they compare taxation and also the service delivery, they are not matching. So there is a lot of wastage. There's a lot of leakages, there are a lot of tax evasion, there is high net worth individuals who are not in the tax nets, and yet now only few ones carry the burden. So there's that element of public mistrust now, and also perception. Then there's element of tax compliance. The compliance level is very low. You remember when KRA organized a national summit last year, before Barbara Odinga died, no, the day he died, I think I was one of the panelists. And during that KRA summit, the key discussion was how do we build on public trust so that Noah will just wake up in the morning and mobilize Patrick, so that there is what we call voluntary compliance. You don't have to be reminded by KRA, because through that is when, once we change that attitude and also perception, by improving on public expenditure, efficiency on public expenditure, so that the Kenyans or taxpayers are able to drive the desired service delivery, then they would automatically take action and say, look, this is the budget that has been read by CS Mbadi. Now, this is the call for action in terms of how we want to raise the finances, because bill is about raising the source of raising those revenues.
Exactly.
Now the Act now confirms you have to be taxed.
Okay.
So that voluntary compliance would now make Kenyans to really raise more revenue through taxation, whether it is indirect or direct taxation, so that we now enhance on domestic resource mobilization. Through this, we are going to reduce on unnecessary external borrowing. Because you see, when the government now wants to compete even with the local small and medium enterprise and corporates to borrow from the bank, the way my brother was putting it, do you know what will happen? Government will have more on their side, then the small and medium enterprises that do not meet even the criteria will not have access to borrow. And do you know what will happen in the economy? The resources would be placed at the government corner, and yet now the consumers will not have purchasing power. That is what I was trying to explain. Okay. So the economy will not grow. So we really need to see how to balance this, so that, and no, lastly, the public debt, this debt that we get, the borrowing we borrow, yes, like 1.1 trillion that we now need to, that deficit, budget deficit. Of course, it's either domestic borrowing or external borrowing. Ask yourself, do you think Kenyans appreciate that as we pay for these debts? Do we see the value? Because people still go to the hospital sometimes, they cry, oh, there are no poor services, there is depleted market infrastructure. Of course, now the government is really addressing that through the market, modern market. There is poor infrastructure. A farmer in a rural area cannot timely deliver their produce on time. Now, you see, when we combine all this, then Kenyans say, no, look, take a break. We need to take a break and have a candid conversation so that it is not about paying taxes, but paying taxes and being accountable for the taxes we pay.
Definitely. That's powerful indeed. I think this is a melting pot, because when we touch on taxes, the ripple effect touches on almost every aspect of our country. But CPA Dennis, looking at the mwananchi at the end of the day, we talked about the disposable income is actually the metric of mwananchi saying, I don't have enough. But also there is the trust deficit and accountability, because sometimes you hear the kind of looting that is going on, resource mismanagement, and definitely that plays a role to that mistrust. So talk to me, what are the biggest gaps that you're seeing in terms of if we work on those particular gaps, we will be at a better position, we as Kenyans, to be confident to onboard ourselves into the tax net, and secondly, also be willing to pay because we know that we are contributing to our national development.
Oh, fantastic. Now, quite a number of things I have to mention. My colleagues have talked about the issue of the MTRS, which is the medium-term revenue strategy paper, that again, was to a great extent giving the framework of these are the administrative side of things that you are going to introduce. These are the tax rates that you are going to introduce. This is how we are going to adjust them and all that. But what we've seen is that the government has not been keen in following the particular provisions of that particular paper. And that is a very big problem, because I can tell you for sure that aspect of, yes, we've given a policy paper, but are we following it? I can tell you for sure, I do know of a case whereby there was a similar policy direction given by the government in a different ministry. And so I do know of investors who actually went ahead and thought, hey, this is what the government is going to do in the next possibly 5-10 years. So what then you're going to do before the laws are actually even changed, enacted and all that, what you're going to do is that you are going to be proactive and, invest our resources, because the government has indicated this is the direction that it's going to take. So what happened? A few years later, after a huge capex expenditure, the organization went and built massive infrastructure, to take advantage of the earlier communicated policy direction. So then after they've done all this, what happened is that the government took an about turn, and they said, this is no longer the case. So what do you think that investor has in mind? Remember, he has already expended a lot of money by way of investing in infrastructure, but now the government taking an about turn, it's a sunk cost for them. And therefore what then they are going to do, and what they are going to strive to do, is that they will strive to recoup these losses in future by way of either increasing taxes or even playing some dubious games, speaking into the issue of motivating people to comply with taxes. Secondly, we had recently, I think a few years ago, last year but one, there was the intention to rebrand KRA from the Kenya Revenue Authority to Kenya Revenue Service, so that it can possibly communicate and give the intention that, hey, we are not pushing our way through things, but rather we are serving you. We are here to serve you. But, you know, we saw the ceremony, but has that been effected by way of branding and all that? That still has not occurred. Finally, on the issue of debt, there is something that is happening, and it's very interesting. So, in addition to the MTRS, there is a similar document that the CS for Treasury presented to the Parliament at the point of, on that day of budget trading. And that document is called the Medium-Term Debt Strategy Paper. And the purpose of this paper is to give the roadmap that the country is going to take so that it can deal with the debt issue. And so one of the provisions of that particular debt strategy paper is an indication that the government will concentrate borrowing within the country, whereby it actually provides that 90% is going to be borrowed within the country, but only borrow 10% from outside the country, our partners and friends and development partners and all that. But what then is going to be the implication for that, I think it is what my colleagues here have said, that the government is then competing with business people.
Okay.
Whereby, as a bank executive, I would be more willing to lend to the government than to an individual or a business who is a high tax risk, or rather who is a high risk by way of honoring their debt obligation. So it is a very big concern, especially because if we concentrated, if perhaps we reduced the rate from 90-10, 90% being locally and 10% being outside of the country, and possibly reduce that to around 60 and 40, it would be advantageous, because most of these commercial loans borrowed outside have very favorable interest rates.
Okay.
Especially think of the major distinction between the concessional and non-concessional loans, whereby in one you're borrowing from your friends, your country friends who are lending you at very reduced rates, sometimes at 2%, 3%. And for commercial loans, they go at about 6%, 7%. So if the government then concentrates so much with borrowing from within the country, the interest rates are going to stay considerably high.
Okay.
Presently, the businesses are borrowing at an average rate of 14%. And this is a clear indication that, yes, there could be availability of funds within the financial institutions, but their preference, of course, is the government, and therefore that, to a very large extent, constrains the funds available to the business.
Definitely. That's a very powerful point. And today, we are focusing on just breaking down these taxes, but you see even now we are in debt. And I think that's even a whole conversation in of itself. Like just looking at this debt question, debt ceilings that we've been setting and breaking them every other day. But gents, we have less than 5 minutes to close this up, and I want to set up scenarios for all of us, okay? Sandeep, I want to give you a scenario. You are the Commissioner General right now. In the next 45 seconds, what are you doing different to make sure that the Kenyan is changing that particular perspective that we've seen, that I'm not feeling too burdened, I'm happy to contribute? What do you do as Commissioner General?
Well, Noah, that's throwing a punch, but fair enough. I think for me, I'm going to start by saying that if you ignore tax and you're running a business, it's like driving at night with no headlights. You're bound to hit something or get into an accident. Tax is becoming very important, and more, I think for me, taxpayers need to be more strategic rather than reactive. So if I were CG for those 45 seconds, I think the first thing would be that knowledge share, and the Revenue Authority has done a very good job in trying to share what the latest updates. They do certain articles and certain social media memes. But it would be building that trust gap that a taxpayer has with the revenue authority, not just with the government. And I'll start by actually improving my systems internally. If I am rushing to automate, and it's a great thing to automate, is my infrastructure ready? So I'll first look inwardly and see what are the gaps. What do taxpayers need to run their businesses seamlessly? The point of technology is not to increase administrative burden on any taxpayer. It is meant to simplify and bring efficiency. So if my systems, as currently coded or as currently developed, are not meeting public expectation, then I would see what I need to do to change that or improve on those. That would be my core, knowledge share and improve internal systems.
Definitely.
As I look to increase the revenue base.
Definitely. You never know. Yeah. You know, this might be a rehearsal. Next we hear Sandeep, next CG, but we have a new CG in the office right now. I want to bring in Robert Minor. Now you've heard what our imaginary CG will do, yeah? But they don't operate in a vacuum. They have to work with Treasury to make sure that we move into the legislative arm and so that the process is followed properly. You are the Cabinet Secretary, Treasury and National Planning. What are you doing to convince Kenyans this tax net, you need to get into it and you're not being fished out to be eaten, but actually you're contributing to the country?
Well, extremely big shoes to fit into. Now, to give it to the current CS, FCPA body, he has been more open, more available to the general public compared to many other previous CSs. He has probably brought this discussion home, and I'll give it to him for that. Now, being the current CS, or if I was the CS for sure, the messaging is clear. The message you bring out, can the government demonstrate? Because the key thing is the trust deficit is, people are just are not feeling what the government is doing. You give people all the macros, and unfortunately, if you talk to the PAs, they will give you all the macros, inflation, exchange rate, and everything. But if you talk to most of the Kenyans, they are not interested in those. Am I getting money? Am I getting my next meal? Okay. Am I being able to pay? So the messaging and ensuring that I address those common Kenyans would be my first priority.
Definitely, messaging. Patrick Nyagwaso,
yes.
In 40 seconds, because I know you talk faster. All right?
Yes.
You are leading this nation.
Yes.
You are the president. You are the leader. Talk to Kenyans. Why should they come into this net?
Good. I will take the opportunity to make Kenyans just to understand that we have to develop the nation. The quality services that you require can only be facilitated when you pay taxes. So one is to build their trust by building systems that are accountable, and accountability would be mainstreamed through constructive citizens engagement. Number two, if you make me want to be His Excellency the President today, the 4.8 trillion, I would ensure that the spending translates into the following. One, creating jobs. Two, enhancing on liquidity. Three, I focus on production. Four, enhancing on export readiness. Five, making SMEs to be stronger through having a simpler tax administrative system that would be able to offer what we call simple compliance for SMEs, because this is the foundation. Okay. I would also ensure that my cabinet secretaries are able to really communicate the expenditures to the taxpayers. Okay. So this would really enhance on credibility and accountability and also transparency when it comes to public resources utilization.
Definitely. Patrick Nyagwaso, it's like you've been practicing this, man. That's very detailed. That I know you talk matters taxation, National Taxpayers Association is at the core of it. And finally, CPA Dennis, you've listened to the CG, you've listened to the Cabinet Secretary, you've listened to the President. You are the Mwananchi. Are you convinced in 45 seconds? And if not, what will convince you as a Kenyan to come into this net?
The topmost reason that would convince me to come within the tax net and to have that willing heart to contribute towards the national development agendas would be a direct and explicit indication by the president and the executive at large that they have a concentrated effort towards fighting corruption. Yeah, I would speak into the issue of strengthening the judiciary. I think we've seen them really complain about budget cuts and all that, but it's not pleasing when you see your taxes being, being utilized to buy, for instance, medicines which will probably be disposed. I think we've seen reports of medications being disposed by KEMSA.
Okay.
Questioning into the procurement method, procurement reasons, and all that. So the number one thing that would make myself and majority of Kenyans to be willing to contribute towards the nation building is a direct intent and a very intentional person to fight corruption.
Definitely.
With concluded cases and obviously with implications.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Today, as you go to sleep, maybe you might dream you're in those specific offices, and if you don't, it's still okay. But thank you very much, CPA Dennis Wakaba, tax expert, ISPAC, Patrick Nyangweso, CEO, National Taxpayers Association, Robert Miner, Associate Director, Tax at Ernst & Young, and Sandeep Main, Partner, Tax and Regulatory Services at KPMG. Thank you very much for participating in this conversation on the business fix. I do appreciate your involvement, and that's where we'll put a full stop tonight. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation. And the goal of the business fix is to welcome wananchi issues, contextualize them, make sure that you are getting your voice in the world of business. My name is Nokip Kimboy. Thank you very much to my colleagues Kelly Boss and Esther Diana, also our producer Brenda, for making sure that this production goes as it has gone. Good night. Bye-bye for now. See you next Tuesday on The Business Fix. We out. Thank you, gentlemen.